Hi, this is John Linneball, and this is AP U.S. History Video 63, Economic Consolidation and Robber Barons in the Gilded Age. This is John Linneball from John Linneball Tutoring, as I just said, and my phone number is 415-623-4251, and you can also find me at www.johnlinneballtutoring.com. All right, let's move on. Economic consolidation concentrated wealth. Small businesses were replaced or consolidated to form large businesses in the late 1800s. This consolidation led to monopolies, trusts, and holding companies in the late 1800s. The major industries of the Gilded Age were railroads, steel, and oil. Corporations used their new practices to dominate the production of everyday products like shoes, bicycles, etc. Mass production made cheaper versions of previously prohibitively expensive custom goods. That is, most people couldn't afford it. So let's move on. Robber barons. This was a disrespectful term used to describe the new industrialists. Users of that term believed the barons basically thought they were barons, but really they were basically criminals, according to these people. The term robber baron originated with the German lords who set up toll barriers on their roads over land or on waterways on the Rhine River. And one of the main tactics, of course, of robber barons was cutthroat competition. That is, the robber barons were extremely competitive against rival companies and worked to put these rival companies out of business so they could gain monopoly or close to monopoly status. The idea was basically cut costs as much as possible, charge the absolute lowest price, putting the other companies, I should say, out of business, which you might say, hey, that's great. Trouble is, once the other companies were out of business, the next thing the robber barons would do is raise the prices. So they weren't really helping out the average person so much as helping themselves. And as some people have pointed out to me, some of these robber barons probably literally cut people's throats when necessary. I mean, I'm not saying that any of the famous people did it, but I'm sure they could hire some people to take care of business in that way if they needed to. And the whole robber baron era in American history did lead to crimes and civil wrongs, things you could sue in civil court over that hadn't previously been illegal because nobody had actually thought of them yet. These people actually had to create things that the government said, hey, wait a minute, this should be illegal. So, for example, antitrust law wasn't necessary until trusts were invented by the robber barons. Robber barons. Now, this next thing actually happened when I searched, I believe it was Bing, for did robber barons literally cut people's throats? I couldn't find anything directly on point, but I did check this link to Amazon. And when I clicked on this, what I got was this www.amazon page couldn't be found. Thought that was kind of funny. Maybe it's Jeff Bezos thought the robber baron label came a little too close to home, so he didn't want people looking at it. And if you're watching this, Jeff or Jeff Bezos, fanboys, fangirls, whatever, have a sense of humor about yourself, please. Anyway, again, these things really did, these robber barons created crimes and civil causes of action that hadn't previously been illegal because they couldn't exist before, because nobody had thought of that sort of crime, let alone anyone thinking, hey, wait a minute, this should be a crime. Vertical integration or vertical consolidation is when one company controls all aspects of a good or service. So here we have a little diagram here. Here's the manufacturer, which goes to the retailer, which goes to logistics, where it's distributed, suppliers, resellers, this, da, 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 and they all go to the customer. So in Carnegie's case, He controlled all aspects of steel productions, from literally mining the iron ore from mountains to steel making to distributing the steel products. So that was vertical. Basically, his factories, his company basically controlled everything, didn't have to work with any other companies if he didn't want to, going literally from mining things out of the ground to selling it to people in retail stores. Carnegie's huge acts of charity. Now, Andrew Carnegie, although he was a robber baron, one of the original ones, he actually did donate a lot of money to charity. And there are still buildings, etc., that bear his name, that his money paid for, and he really did want to help people. And here's a little quote. With the aid of the knowledge he gleaned from books, Carnegie later reached the pinnacle of success in the American business world. The former bobbin boy rose to become a personal secretary, a railroad superintendent, financial investor, and bridge company owner. By the 1870s, he had founded his first steel plant, which eventually grew into the mighty Carnegie Steel Company. In 1901, at the age of 65, Carnegie sold the business to industrialist J.P. Morgan for a cool $480 million, the equivalent of over $13 billion today. The sale made Carnegie the richest man in the world. Carnegie himself said, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced." He became a philanthropist and used his fortune to improve society. Carnegie funded retirement pensions for teachers, established the Carnegie Institute of Technology, which later became Carnegie Mellon University, and set up scientific research centers and organizations devoted to world peace. Everything in quotes here is from www.history.com /news/ Andrew Carnegie's surprising legacy. So at least he was one of those people who did actually back up his talk with action. Said, well, anybody can make it if they get education. And so he made sure people had educations and opportunities. Carnegie also furnished towns across the globe with everything from music halls and swimming pools to church organs. He also founded many public libraries, including the original public library in my hometown of North Tonawanda, New York, which is now called Carnegie Art Center. Here's the URL for that if you want to see that. And another town has the Carnegie Cultural Center, and you can see that. And of course, there's New York City's world famous Carnegie Hall for music performances, etc. Which leads us to one of my favorite corny jokes. A tourist came to New York City and asked somebody, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" "Practice, practice, practice." Or as these hip cats had to say, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" "Practice, man." All right, so here's a little picture of Carnegie Hall. Here's the entrance, the outside, and here is the performance space. Horizontal integration or consolidation, John D. Rockefeller's strategy. Rockefeller used the strategy of horizontal integration or horizontal consolidation. Basically, that was getting a monopoly or close to a monopoly in an industry. That was usually done by forming trusts that were formed by directors of different corporations being in the same industries. So those would be called interlocking directorates. That way, the directors of all these different companies could come together and say, "Oh, we're doing this. Hey, isn't that good that we're both on the boards of directors of two important companies, or even more than that, more than two companies in this industry, so we can basically control the whole industry." These people would cooperate with each other instead of competing against each other, thus ensuring that all these companies made money. Rockefeller purchased smaller oil companies to achieve this horizontal integration. Interlocking directorates is a business practice wherein a member of one company's board of directors also serves on another company's board or within the company's management. Under antitrust legislation, interlocking directorates are not illegal as long as the corporations do not, and as you might read, aren't supposed to compete with each other. So you could have two companies that officially aren't in the same business, have interlocking directorates, that's fine, but there's probably a lot of games they can play there to say, well, all right, they're not technically in the same field, but realistically they are, or they're complementary. They're things that naturally go together. But I digress. Let's move on. While trusts became illegal, Rockefeller achieved the same goals using holding companies, which first became legal in 1889 in New Jersey. Holding companies could legally buy other companies' stocks, thus controlling those companies. So they held other companies' stock and basically could use this holding company to control all the companies that they held. Standard Oil controlled approximately 90% of the U.S. oil market by the 1890s. Rockefeller / Standard Oil then did vertical organization. You can see Carnegie's slides there, where basically, literally went from crude oil to producing gasoline, da 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 da. So, Standard Oil bought oil fields, expanded from refining and delivering oil to also marketing oil products at gas stations and retail stores. So it was literally everything from pumping it out of the ground to pumping it into your tank at a Standard Oil gas station. Let's move on. Rockefeller's trust, Standard Oil. Standard Oil dominated the oil processing industry, that is separating or, in quotes, refining crude oil into gasoline and other oil products. It operated from 1897 until 1911 when the Supreme Court ruled it was an illegal monopoly. And you can look that up further under Standard Oil on Wikipedia. The company was split into 34 different companies. So Standard Oil of New Jersey is now Exxon Mobil after the Standard Oil spinoffs Exxon and Mobil were reunited. Standard Oil used market pressure to negotiate lower prices on oil shipments. Since the company could guarantee large shipments, transportation companies accepted lower rates. The idea, if you get a bulk rate, if you ship enough oil, they don't mind cutting a few extra pennies per gallon off or whatever it was. Smaller oil companies that couldn't do that couldn't compete. That was just too bad for them, so they ended up going out of business or just not being able to compete effectively, so they might be marginalized to business, to regions or niches in the oil industry that Standard Oil didn't care about. Other business practices were just clever. For example, Standard Oil used the Erie Canal for cheap oil shipping in the months when it wasn't frozen. So during the spring and the summer and the fall, they could ship things using this waterway instead of having to truck it or use some other way that was more expensive. That's not just, it's not an unethical business practice. It's just a smart business practice is what I was trying to say. Okay. Rockefeller's charitable acts. Despite the cutthroat business practices, Rockefeller, much like Carnegie, donated very large sums of money to charity and was famous for distributing dimes to kids to encourage saving and as a reward. For example, he gave a dime to Harvey Firestone, the tire tycoon, as a reward for playing a good golf shot. And yes, Harvey Firestone is the guy who founded the Firestone Tire Company. The Rockefeller Foundation was founded to further Rockefeller's charitable interests and still funds various charities. You can look that up on Wikipedia under Rockefeller Foundation. The first grant was to the Red Cross for public health, and unfortunately, sometimes he funded some things that were unpopular and should have been unpopular. For example, he supported eugenics back when it was popular, in the 1920s until 1951, and you can see that in the Rockefeller Foundation and look up under eugenics and World War II. Other noteworthy robber barons. While Carnegie and Rockefeller were the most famous, there were others. Armour. He was a Chicago-based meat packing mogul. One of my grandmas actually worked at an Armour hot dog plant in New York City a long time ago. As my father liked to say, he had never seen his mother eat a hot dog. So tells you a little bit about that. But anyway, so you can check this out at Meet the Rubber, not the rubber, Meet the Robber Barons, Vanderbilt, Gould, Carnegie, and others. And of course, Barron's AP History, 4th edition, 5th edition, etc. So let's move on. Other noteworthy robber barons. Jay Gould. Gould reportedly involved his partner in the tannery business in engaging in foolish investments, resulting in the partner's financial ruin and eventual suicide. Gould, nonetheless, prospered. So, who was Gould? Gould was a railroad magnate. He made a fortune from the Rutland and Washington Railroad and the Erie Railroad, and then other railroads. Some historians believe that the term robber baron is unfairly applied to Gould because he did create new railroads to undercut standard prices set by the railroad trust slash cartel. In other words, the railroads established by other robber barons. But when Cornelius Vanderbilt tried to take control of the Erie Railroad in the 1860s, Gould, along with Fisk, James Fisk was his name, and Daniel Drew, basically bribed officials and issued fake stock, eventually fending off Vanderbilt and gaining control of the company. This was called the Erie War. So, that's a bit of a problem. You can't really say, gee, what a Robin Hood kind of guy. I mean, he basically committed fraud just to, keep control of his business. Yes, it did thwart a huge robber baron, but they themselves were robber barons, and by they I mean Gould, Fisk, and Drew. Anyway, but Gould did do some socially useful things, but was not above violating the law and general moral precepts for personal gain. Precepts, I guess. Anyway, so Jim Fisk was called the Barnum of Wall Street. As we just learned, he worked with Mr. Gould, and he was the guy who was known as Diamond Jim, Big Jim, Jubilee Jim. He was a business partner of Mr. Gould. He was involved in something called Black Friday, not the Black Friday during the Great Depression. That wouldn't be for another, whatever, 30, 40 years. That was in 1929. This was long before that. But anyway, this was another Black Friday. So Black Friday was an attempt to trade on President Grant's name to corner the gold market. It failed. Basically, Jim Fisk was shot in New York City by a romantic rival who also tried to blackmail Fisk with scandalous letters from Fisk to his ex-girlfriend after Stokes, the man who shot him, stole Fisk's girlfriend. The problem is the letters themselves were not really that scandalous or spicy, so Fisk just said, yeah, go ahead, print it, I don't care. And that really annoyed Mr. Stokes and stoked his hatred. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, if you want to know more about that, you can look up James Fisk at Wikipedia, and you can also look up Black Friday, 1869, Wikipedia. John Pierpont Morgan was a financier who controlled railroads and basically controlled almost the entire U.S. economy. His bank is now part of J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. Unlike most other robber barons, J.P. Morgan came from a very wealthy family, so he's not a self-made man. He was born in 1837, and he started in his father's banking business. Morgan later founded J.P. Morgan and Company in 1871, and this was a bank that had support from the U.S. government and financed the U.S. government, and was a predecessor of three of the world's biggest banks, such as J.P. Morgan Chase, the investment firm Morgan Stanley, and Deutsche Bank. Another such baron was Cornelius Vanderbilt, who we just mentioned in passing before. Cornelius Vanderbilt was born May 27th, 1794, and died in January of 1877, January 4th to be specific. He was nicknamed the Commodore because he started his business with kind of a little ferry business, so it's kind of a joke. Ha ha! Look at the Commodore. He has one ship that he uses. Anyway, he relatively quickly became an American business magnate who built his wealth in railroads and shipping. After working with his father's business, Vanderbilt worked his way into leadership positions in the inland water trade, that is, the trade of water rights, and invested in the rapidly growing railroad industry, effectively transforming the geography of the United States. And what do I mean by the water trade? Well, it's dealing with water rights. If you control who gets to use water, you control industry, agriculture, and even drinking water. It's reminiscent of something from the book of Revelations in the Bible. Vanderbilt donated very little to charity except about $1 million donation to found Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. Of course, $1 million back then is worth a lot more anyway, but I digress. The mark of the beast, the end times? Probably not, but robber barons were creepy. And that no man might buy or sell save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. I'm not a religious person, but even I find private control of water to be creepy. After all, we need water to survive. Some states regulate the collection of rainwater. I mean, literally collecting water that comes from rain. But mostly it's for safety if the collectors intend to use the water as drinking water, and it's also for fair allocation of water in states with scarce water. You don't need to believe in a beast to know that unrestricted private control over a basic human need is wrong. So if you want to know more about that, you can look at this website. Is it illegal to collect rainwater? The 2024 Complete State Guide, etc. And you can also see current day agribusinesses, that is agricultural businesses, that try to make it illegal for farmers to save seeds for future years. And these are mostly genetically modified seeds, etc. And here's some websites you can look at for that. And I also have that in the notes. Corporate ownership of an entire species or subspecies may not be a good idea. Can a GMO's patent owner sue if a farmer's non-GMO plants are pollinated by the company's GMOs? Maybe. I'm sure they'd like that. I'm sure they'd like to make everybody have to pay for, their special genetically engineered crops, etc. And can farmers who can't afford the GMOs be driven out of business if the company's GMOs make it impossible to grow non-GMO crops? I don't know. Anyway, this reminds me of the plot to Omen 3 from the series of movies about the Antichrist, the final conflict. You might remember The Omen from 1976, and they did a remake in 2006, and this, I think, was from 1983. Anyway, you can learn all about it by looking at this Wikipedia article, The Final Conflict film. Now, I don't really believe in a supernatural satanic cabal or anything like that that's trying to control the world or that tried to control it 100 years from now, etc. But it doesn't matter. When you have concentrated power and wealth to that degree where 1% of the population controls pretty much as the rest of the world combined. Anyway, it's a problem. So let's talk about even more noteworthy robber barons. Let's talk about Russell Sage. He was a railroad executive, financier, and Whig politician from New York State. He became one of the wealthiest Americans of all time. He was convicted of violating New York State usury laws when he was caught using stock options to exceed the maximum legal interest. That's what usury is. Usury is when you charge an illegally high rate of interest, also known as being a loan shark. So people who do it in a fancy way, it's called usury. If you do it in the not so fancy way, you're a loan shark, where it's like, where's my money? Bad things happen to people who don't pay me back. Okay, anyway, but let's go on. Options were called puts, which allowed people to sell stock at a given price. So that was good if you expected stocks to decline. So you say, I've got a put. You had to buy it at this price, which now you know is too high, but it wasn't when I ordered the put. Also, there were calls, which allowed people to buy at a set price, which would be good if the stock price went up. I get a bargain because I set this price before. So Sage combined them to earn excessive interest on loans. And he got caught, got in some trouble over that. Sage's wife founded the women's college, Russell Sage College in Troy, New York. Also donated Sage Hall to Williams College, which is where I went to college. And also Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, also known as RPI, and the Emma Willard School, which is also in Troy, New York. So let's talk about another robber baron, Collis P. Huntington, one of the big four of Western railroading, along with Leland Stanford, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker. He helped develop the Southern Pacific Railroad and the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway. I'll try that again. The Chesapeake and Ohio Railway. The Big Four's political machine bribed many congressmen and other politicians. Huntington's response was, the motives back of my actions have been honest ones, and results have redounded far more to the benefit of California than they have to my own. And one interesting note is Mark Hopkins in San Francisco, the Mark Hopkins Hotel, has the Big Four restaurant. So they celebrated it and said, here's my fancy restaurant, and it's part of the Big Four. All right. Another noteworthy robber baron was Mark Hanna. He was a coal and iron magnate who became a senator from Ohio. He was a Republican and a political ally of President William McKinley, who was a huge supporter of trusts, robber barons, etc. And of course, there was Leland Stanford. And this building in the background is part of Stanford University's campus. He was a railroad magnate who founded the eponymous university that is named after Stanford, Mr. Stanford. The Stanford University was named after Stanford. Stanford was named after Stanford. Stanford. Anyway, he paid approximately $40 million to found Stanford in 1891, which is about $1.35 billion today. He was a very important executive of Central Pacific Railroad from 1861 to 1890, and he was also against Chinese immigration, but the Central Pacific Railroad used Chinese immigrant labor to build railroads, etc. So go figure. Certainly not the last person who would hypocritically say, oh no, we need to keep out immigrants, and then use all sorts of immigrant labor to do his business, or her business, I suppose. Okay, let's move on. Many robber barons founded colleges. As you can see, many robber barons funded the colleges and universities in the United States. Was it because of ego? They just wanted something fancy named after them? Was it support for business ideology? Was it for a great tax dodge? Yes, it was for all of those. It was all the above. You can have buildings named after you. You can influence the curriculum. You can say, well, I want people to think I'm a great person, and that, blah, 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 that everything I did, even if it seems a little sleazy, it's really not, it's necessary. So there are some exceptions. For example, Yale University turned down an offer from the Hunt brothers, who, dominated the silver trade and some other things. Basically, they wanted to have an endowment, a fund, basically an endowment, which would be used to fund courses that supported Western culture. Only very, very big, prestigious colleges can actually turn down humongous grants like that. Other colleges will gladly take it. Kind of makes sense, because in that case, you could say, all right, we'll use this to fund Western culture, and then we'll just take all the other money that we can move around and use it for everything else that isn't Western culture, according to the Hunt brothers, and just get on with it. But I don't need to second guess what Yale did with their money. I think it was very morally courageous for them to say, no, 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 no. You don't tell us what to do with the money. We're not going to let you influence our curriculum. Okay, so the idea, especially back in the old days, in the 1950s, there was actually a 90%, maximum tax rate. And not that anybody really paid that. And one reason they didn't is because what they would do is they would instead give things away to charity. They would start their own foundations, etc., so they could fund their own pet projects. So one of them might even be starting your own university or funding a university that already exists. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing, and it did at least get some worthwhile things funded and done and established and perpetuated. And in case you're wondering what the background is, this is Rodney Dangerfield in the 1983 movie Back to School, where he plays a self-made man in the garment industry who never went to college, so he decides to go to college with his son, and hijinks ensue. Anyway, it's actually a pretty funny movie if you want to see it. They might have it on Netflix or something. I don't know. It's from 1983, so they might not. But it's a pretty cool movie. Anyway, but I digress. Let's move on. We're close to a second Gilded Age. If you have seen my previous AP U.S. history video, you've seen that we're close to a second Gilded Age. So here I'm talking about J.P. Morgan, or JPM, as I put here in the notes. Basically, he was a famous financier, I don't know, however you pronounce that. And his investment house lives on as part of J.P. Morgan Chase, which was created when Congress made it legal for commercial and home banks to also be investment houses, basically stockbrokers. So here you can see back around those days that J.P. Morgan was this giant who controlled everything with cash, including the law and Uncle Sam and da-da-da. So it was illegal from the Depression days until the 1990s, when the Glass-Steagall Banking Act of 1933 was repealed in 1999. And people, if you read this article from Wikipedia that says, well, it was already dead, it had already basically become almost completely ineffectual because of different modifications made to it, exceptions, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Anyway, it's just a matter of time before we'll see disastrous results from that. Oh, wait a minute. That already happened in 2007 through 2008. The huge real estate bust there, etc. So, stupid decisions aren't just made by the GOP, the Republican Party. They're also made by Democrats. They're made by anybody who, well, lets a lot of these investment houses tell them what the laws should be, and really that lets any industry regulate itself. It doesn't work. Greed can cause people to become awfully stupid awfully quickly, especially if they are pretty sure that the government will bail them out when they make a mistake. See what happened in 2007 through 2008. And here's a little bit more about the robber barons. So this is where I got the information about the original German robber barons, etc. And certainly this diversifiedtrust.com, they have some different opinions about it, how, well, robber barons actually got a lot of things done, etc. That is a worthwhile point of view. You can look at it, you can make your own decisions, but you can probably tell from what I'm putting in the video what I think of that. So here you go. If we look at the Gilded Age robber barons, okay, so Rockefeller died in 1937. He was worth, adjusted for inflation to today, or at least, okay, to last year, that was $346 billion in 2023 dollars. Vanderbilt was worth 281 billion. Again, if you adjust for inflation from, whatever, the early 20th century to the early 21st century. Okay, Carnegie 110 billion, Ford 110 billion, Leland Stanford 74 billion, and JP Morgan only 40 billion. God, he must have been in the poorhouse. And so you can compare this to people like Elon Musk. Okay, so better off than Carnegie or Ford. But when Bill Gates, okay, also better off than Carnegie and Ford, Larry Ellison, okay, da da da. So these are all tech people. Mark Zuckerberg, hey, the Facebook, he even had a little bit more money than Carnegie and Ford. Ford, my car is a Ford. Lots of people's cars are Fords, etc. Lots of trucks. These are all people who made steel and oil and da da da. And these people are mostly computer people. And Elon Musk, okay, he's got the Tesla and well, now he has Twitter, now X, etc. But the only thing that's really making him any money is Tesla, which, by the way, he didn't invent. He bought it from other people. But I digress. Warren Buffett, okay, the Oracle of Omaha, whatever they call him. Okay, so he's, again, a little bit above Carnegie and Ford. And then Jeff Bezos, Mr. Amazon. Okay, still, so they're all basically, they didn't get as far as Vanderbilt or Rockefeller, but they, okay, Carnegie and Ford, automakers and, extreme steel makers, that's pretty good. But anyway, so it's fair to compare these people, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, Buffett, Ellison, Bezos, to the the robber barons. Okay. And one thing you should note is that Bill Gates, after a lot of pressure, after a lot of criticism, finally did give a lot of money to charity. Zuckerberg, for example, he donated enough money, etc., to SF General, San Francisco General Hospital, that it's now called Zuckerberg General Hospital. So these people, even the modern robber barons do eventually give money to charity once they realize, oh, I have so much money, I don't even know what to do with it, and I don't want to be taxed on it. I'd rather be able to spend it on something that makes me look good and blah, 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 is something I actually care about. Wouldn't that be nice if you could do that with your tax money? Say, all right, I want my money to go to things that I actually think are worthwhile, not just what the IRS says, no, we're going to distribute it any way we want. Have a nice day. Anyway, that's the difference between people who have a lot of money, like these people, and people like you and me who have relatively no money. Okay, let's move on. Now, the factors leading to the robber baron's success, what they talk about here are things like, you can look it up here, is that they had abundant natural resources, which the U.S. did and still does. Abundant labor, well, population definitely increased greatly, especially because of immigration. Railroads were developed, technological advances such as oil oil-powered cars, etc., electricity, the Bessemer steel process and its progeny, the things that improved on the Bessemer steel process, and the assembly line, and of course, pro-business government policies, including low tax rates and minimal regulation. Which is great until you see, well, okay, that meant a lot of people got injured. That meant, some people were basically starving and sick, etc., while you had other people who had so much money they didn't know what to do with it. So, while that was great and that led to a lot of business, there were reasons that it didn't continue on that way. Let's move on. Seeking new markets, imperialism. As industrial production increased, U.S. manufacturers looked to Latin America, Asia, and the Pacific for new markets. European powers had been colonizing Latin American, African, Asian, and Pacific territories, and the U.S. government believed it needed to catch up. Many U.S. citizens opposed U.S. expansionism, that is, imperialism, since the U.S. government was based on the idea that the British imperialism, remember when the U.S. was part of the British Empire, was unwarranted, and that's the idea that led to the American Revolution. So, as George Carlin put, this whole country is based on a bunch of slave owners who wanted to be free. Anyway, the U.S.'s taking over of Hawaii and the Spanish-American War, both of which happened in 1898, started the U.S. on the path of becoming a global power. Seeking new markets, imperialism. U.S. imperialism will be discussed at greater length in future videos. And U.S. imperialism has also been touched on in AP U.S. History video 42 regarding foreign trade, videos 47 and 48, expanding the U.S., and 49, opening Japan to trade. Did you find this video useful? If you did, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Neither action costs you anything, and you'll be alerted about my new videos. If you saw an ad during this video, please know I didn't get any money from it, and I won't until I have the subscribers and view time that YouTube demands. Why? Well, YouTube won't share any ad revenue with me until I have 500 subscribers and 3,000 hours of view time in a year. I have over 500 subscribers, so thanks folks, everybody who subscribed, that is. However, I don't have 3,000 hours of watch time, at least not from this year. Ad money will help me make more videos. So for that reason and for other reasons, you are not only welcome, but you're encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc. I gladly read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos. Got an idea? Bring it up. Got some criticism? You think I got something wrong? Great. If you just want to yell mean things at me, that's fine. I'll just go, okay, well, na to you too. Anyway, I do reserve the right to delete such comments that constitute troll posts or just spam. And you can hire me for tutoring. You can contact me, and we could, if you're in the Bay Area or somewhere I'm going to be, we can do it live, or we can do it through Zoom, or we can figure something else out. Thanks for watching. How to contact me. You can reach me on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Linneball Tutoring, Instagram, basically instagram.com/john.linneball.tutoring. And my cell phone number is 415-623-4251. You can call or text. My office number is 415-986-7355. You'll probably just end up leaving a message, but hey, that's cool. Leave a message. I'll call you back. And my email is john@johnlinneball.com. My website is johnlinneball.com or johnlinneballtutoring.com. They go to the same website. Shh, don't tell anyone, it's a secret. Okay, and you can also find me at testpreparation.locals.com. You can find me at lbry.tv at John Linneball Tutoring. And if you want to send me good old-fashioned snail mail, postal mail, you can send it to 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 9433. All right, have a nice day. And please like, subscribe, share, do all that nifty stuff, and have a great day.